Hey, Wheelchair Gunfighter here. This is going to be part 2 of functional technique building. Now let me first clarify that this series is not about showing a bunch of techniques for the wheelchair. It's about outlining the entire process to the best of my ability on how to build your own techniques. And the reason for that is that, number one, power is not generated the same way from the wheelchair as from the standing position or someone who can utilize their legs, even someone who can utilize their legs from the sitting position. Two, the way that person generates power and the angles that they apply force and the situations that they might need to defend against are all going to be very different from wheelchair user to wheelchair user, due mostly to differences in body type, fitness levels, disability, types of wheelchairs, their likely environment, all kinds of stuff. What weapons they're using, obviously. All of it amounts to a unique perspective on self-defense. So there's going to be 3 parts to this little sub mini-series inside of the larger series, and this is going to be mechanisms of injury. This is what you're trying to do to the human body to shut it down. Now, I'm not talking about killing people. What I'm talking about is you are presented with a severe threat, and being in a wheelchair, just about any violent threat is going to be a lot more dangerous than for a lot of other folks because you don't have the ability to run away. So you're stuck in place and have to deal with a problem. Or pray that you just end up okay. That's going to be your moral imperative that drives that. So if you think it's morally superior to be a victim, I can't help you. And that's probably not why you're watching this video. So this is about how to stop a person from doing what he's doing. Now, if there's some kind of conflict, generally speaking, there's only a few ways that's gonna play out. One, you prevent it altogether. You prevent it or avoid it. And we like to think here, we equate violent encounters to car accidents. 99% of them can be avoided if somebody's paying attention to the right things. So if you can avoid it and avoid the situation, do so, because you're putting yourself in a position of disadvantage just by being present in a wheelchair trying to solve that problem. The next thing you can do is try to get that person to stop thinking about attacking you. And generally speaking, here you're talking about social type violences. You're talking about fights in hierarchy to see who's the bigger monkey and other stuff that's social in nature. It's about trying to prove a point within a social dynamic. You can't try to talk your way out of an asocial predator attack. It's just, you just can't. We're operating on 2 different mental planes. That's just not how it works. So what do we have to do then? We have to stop that person physically. Now you can try to control them. That'd be the first level, but that's not really applicable to a wheelchair. Trying to control an able-bodied person from a position of disability, it doesn't work, trust me. It can work with a whole lot of skill, but only in select situations, so training for it is not really productive. You can disrupt their control over their body, and now what you're talking about is like nerve strikes, pressure points, pain compliance, stuff like that. But it's non-destructive. And that stuff has been shown to be non-reliable. It's not reliable, and it's mostly for stuff where you're very concerned about escalation of force. You're mostly talking about an official capacity like law enforcement. You can only do so much. Now from the wheelchair, because disparity of force is built into the dynamic of self-defense, meaning that the force that they bring is vastly superior to what you can generate inherently without a lot of skill. A lot of the times the only thing you can do is to physically break things on their body to stop them from doing what they're doing. There's 3, and we're talking about incapacitation is the word. Sometimes, if you're talking about handguns or knives, death can result from those things, but that is not the objective. The objective is to stop the threat from what he is doing. Now, breaking the body. There's 3 ways, essentially, to incapacitate somebody who's trying to attack you. You could incapacitate them psychologically. You could incapacitate them systemically. You can incapacitate them mechanically. Psychologically, it can be really subtle stuff, and I'm not talking about trying to convince somebody not to hurt you. I'm talking about psychological incapacitation. Now, where this manifests itself a lot of the times is where you can somehow disrupt what they're seeing or what they're hearing, mostly what they're seeing and what they're hearing. The brain, how it works is once it stops getting signal input, it stops receiving intelligence to make decisions, it freezes. It stops to process. That's a form of psychological incapacitation. So you can invoke a freeze response in the other person if you know what you're doing. And there's certain things that you can do, like attack the eyes. If they can't see, because the eyes are so dominantly used by by most people to gather all of their intelligence, attacking the eyes is going to make them stop what they're doing just because their brain isn't processing what's going on. Ear is kind of the same thing, but not quite the same effect. So psychological. Systemic is going to be the systems of your body. It's shutting down the systems of your body, your opponent's body, to interfere with what he's doing. So I'm talking about the central nervous system, which is going to be your most instantaneous, but it's also one of the harder things to reach from the front. But you're talking about the spine and you're talking about the computer. So you think computer, central processing unit, and the hardwiring. This can also be the nerves in certain places. And by nerves, I don't mean punching, striking nerves, pinching nerves. I mean cutting nerves. The last one is mechanical. Mechanical incapacity. So systemic, central nervous system, your airway, or your blood. By blood, you're talking about the pump, or you're talking about the hydraulic system. You're talking about the veins and arteries. The airway, you're talking about the path of travel, you're talking about the pipes, and you're talking about the bags, you're talking about the lungs. So you affect the air, you affect the blood, you affect the electrical signals. You're going to, it may not be instantaneous, but you're going to quickly shut down that person from hurting you. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean lethal. It may just be temporary enough for him to stop what he's doing. Now the last one is mechanical. And this is the one I highly favor. Whenever you can get a mechanical effect on an attacker, do it. Because it's the only thing that's instantaneous and very reliable. And that means different things depending on what you're doing. Using your hands, we're mostly talking about attacking joints. The reason for that is that you can apply leverage with your hands. You have two hands, leverage, you require 2 points of contact. You apply 2 points of contact with your arms, causing leverage on the joints. You can break them. It's mechanical. That arm from that joint down is disabled. If it's an arm, it's not going to be able to hold a weapon or at least swing the weapon to continue to do damage. If it's a leg, it means they can't chase you. You equalize the playing field in terms of mobility. Actually, you put it in your favor. You disable someone's mobility, they can't run after you, and you've essentially, a lot of times, you've neutralized that threat, weapons notwithstanding. You're talking about adding certain tools. Previous video we talked about the tomahawk. That definition of the numbers of mechanisms within that injury category expand significantly. You're talking about knives, okay? Knives can cause all kinds of mechanical effects. Now you're not just talking about the bones themselves, but you're talking about the systems that drive those bones, which would be your muscles and your connective tissue by association. So you start attacking major muscle groups, you start cutting at major muscle groups, stabbing at major muscle groups, you start cutting at where those major muscle groups attach to bone. That's having a mechanical effect. It's very, very fast. It's instantaneous. You do that, that part of the body is disabled, so it can no longer hurt you. This also means that with knives, that you can do selective injury. You don't have to, like a gun, you can't really control, if you're firing center of mass, you can't really control whether or not it's a lethal shot. Bullets do weird, even if you're trying not to kill them, bullets do weird stuff inside of the body. A knife, you can be very selective with how you injure that person and only do what is necessary to stop the threat. When you're talking about knives as well, you start talking about exposed nerves. Those nerves are what send electrical signals to that part of the body to control it. So it's central nervous system, but it's also, you're attacking the central nervous system in that sense. You're attacking the nervous system, but it's having a mechanical effect. You cut the nerves that run to the arm, that arm stops moving. That happened to a friend of mine, and Galveston not too long ago who was attacked with a knife outside of a bar, and he had to go through extensive recovery to be able to use his arm again. But in the middle of that fight, and it's corrected by surgery, but in the middle of that fight, that arm's done. So you don't have to worry about that hurting you anymore. So those are the three things we're trying to do, and that's how we prioritize our targets. Mechanical stuff comes first, with the exceptions of what's easy to get to. So if there's stuff that's systemic but it's easier to get to, those might have a higher priority. So it's a combination of what can you reach and what has the most benefit. And mechanical stuff will always have the most benefit because it's the fastest and it's the most reliable. So psychological, which is usually just psychological stuff is usually just bonus added. Systemic, which is your central nervous system, air capacity, blood capacity, and then mechanical, your bone structure and what drives that bone structure, your muscles and tendons, and your nerves can also be part of that. So that's what we're going to be talking about when we're talking about these mechanisms of injury. So this is part 2, but part 3 and 4, we're going to be talking about how to apply certain techniques or forces on the body to affect different parts of the body for maximum benefit towards incapacitation. So anything specifically on the principles of incapacitation, send me an email to wheelchairgunfighter@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, complain, I don't care. Thanks.